So, lucid dreaming, what you're looking to do is to capture the hypnagogic state, that state between sleep and being awake. And when you discover that you're in that state, and interesting that you should have brought up that Carlos Castaneda said he would look for his hands. I can see the value in looking for your hands, because that indicates that you're prepared to do something with them. You're prepared to manipulate. But it doesn't have to be like that. If you have the scenario laid out there, and you can practice drifting in and out of sleep, and practice maintaining your consciousness in that state. And it's actually a fairly easy thing to do. You just simply just focus on it and will it to happen, and then your mind will start to allow that sort of thing to happen. So that rather than to automatically click into an unconscious state, you actually then can start to become aware of what's already there, what's happening, what stories being told by your mind, and then just move from that point. One of the things that I like to do is to take control of it by, say, flying or doing things that I know would be impossible, and just doing them because I want to do them. And I became aware of the fact that I was dreaming for quite a while. So I had, when I was young, I had sensory isolation tanks. These were just saltwater beds with thick insulation to keep noise out, and then a door so you could get in and out of it. It was temperature maintained at skin temperature, which is a little lower than internal body temperature, but it was a great way to do it. And I started to practice in there a little bit too. So you can lay in that area, and just as you start to hallucinate that little bit, just as you start to drift off, that's the state where you can change and do things that you wouldn't normally have maybe have dreamt, but you can actually start to do things. And I remember specifically, I think the first time that I did it, I remember I was driving a car. It was a little red, a yellow, I think it was a little Toyota or something, Celica or something like this. And as I became aware that I was driving, I said, and dreaming, I said, well, let me change this and do some fun stuff in this car. So I did. I started to drive the car up onto buildings and underneath semis, and just do, just totally take control over the whole story that was being, played out there, and just do things that wouldn't probably normally have happened in the dream. In the dream I probably would have gone from driving a car into, something else. And so I was able to really focus on what it was I wanted to do, and do something completely different than what had been happening before. Although I used what was already present in the dream as the basis of what I was going to do, and I just went and deviated from there into something that I thought would be more interesting and exciting for me. And also, I wanted to show myself that I had control, and that I was able to experiment and do things out of the ordinary. And so the symbology of driving a car underneath a semi and up on buildings and all of those things fit perfectly with the idea that I was looking to do something out of the ordinary, and something that required more than just the normal things. I wanted to break out of the mold. So the symbology actually fit the intention, and that made perfect sense. Subsequent to that, there have been other things that I have. I will sometimes change a dream if I don't like the outcome. Sometimes what I'll do then is I'll just go right back into the dream, and I've figured out a way to do that. There was a time when that wasn't as easy. I would completely lose dreams, but I decided that didn't make any sense. and that I could remember the mindset of the dream and go back into it, and then I can remain in a lucid state and change the ending of the dream. Now, one thing that proved important for me, because we were talking about studying John Lilly as and in sensory isolation tanks. Well, one of the other authors that was very useful to me in this particular work was Timothy Leary, and Leary wrote about his experiences using LSD, and he said there were two factors that were important. One was the set and one was the setting. Now, the set is the mindset, and the setting, of course, is the surroundings. And the way those two things interact would give you the outcome of the dream, whether it was pleasurable or whether it was unpleasant, or what happened with that. And by paying a close attention to the mindset that I was in during the dream, I was able to put myself back in the dream, as opposed to starting to pay attention to the mindset of an awake person laying in a bed and feeling the comfort of the bed. Rather than to use that, I would just switch back into whatever mindset had been present at the time of the dream. And that way I was able to re-enter the dream at some stage and relive it, replay it to a more desirable outcome, or what I perceived to be a more desirable outcome. And that was the way I started to learn how to work with those things and re-enter dreams that I had already come out of. And I find that a very effective tool if I can remember what sort of headspace I was in during the dream. And when I say that, I don't just mean, here's put a little bit more detail for it. I mean, I look at where I am inside of my head while I'm watching the dream. That might sound like a funny definition, but sometimes I can be right up here at the front of my head. Sometimes I can be at the back, on one side or another. There's a lot of different places a lot of different perspectives that I can have when I'm looking in the world. This is true, and in the dreams it's also true. And that particular perspective I found to be the key to re-entering the headspace and then re-entering the dream.